Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Carl Jung. This is Mysterium Coniunctionis. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, the link for my book, and a link for contacting me directly so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. I'm also going to take a moment just to ask a favor. If you enjoy what you see here, give me a like, a share, a sub, but also there's a new button. It is called Hype, and if you hit that button, it does great things for the channel. It is free for you to use at least once a day, and so if you find value in this, I would very much appreciate it if you would hit that button along with all of the rest. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Mysterium Coniunctionis with Part F, the journey through the planetary houses. Returning now to Michael Myers' journey to the 7 mouths of the Nile, which signify the 7 planets, we bring to this theme a deepened understanding of what the alchemists meant by ascent and descent. Once again, we are going to stop and pause to point out that I have this represented on my book, right? There are 7 steps. They correspond with the 7 mouths of the Nile and the 7 planets. They represent the 7 virtues and the 7 vices which you need to balance. You do so by traveling up and down this stack internally through self-reflection, but also by pulling energy from the as above and the as below. They are bound together, these 3 on the bottom. This is love and wrath, lust and chastity, gluttony and denial. That is the as below urges, that is dealing with the physicality of the body. You have hope and despair, sloth and diligence, pride and humility. Those are spiritual urges. They are dealing with the as above trinity. They are bound together through the lapis, or the heart, into the as below in accordance with the as above, and this allows you to emanate into the surrounding light and dark equal measure forces of the Holy Spirit. The dark is the void, the light is the infinitesimal point, and you are to find the balance between all of these things within yourself. That is the point of alchemy. That is what is being represented, in my estimation, by Myers' journey to the 7 mouths. We have gotten some bad knowledge from Meyer, but this is something that is in accordance with what I believe, so confirmation bias being acknowledged. It is exactly what I would expect to see from somebody who actually had the knowledge. Back to the text. It was a freeing of the soul from the shackles of darkness or unconsciousness, its ascent to heaven, the widening of consciousness, and finally its return to earth, to hard reality, in the form of the tincture or healing drink, endowed with the powers of the above. I am not in disagreement with any of that, even as psychological reflection or mental alchemy, not physical alchemy, but mental alchemy. Both are the different ways of going about the same thing. What this means psychologically can be seen very clearly from Hypnotochomaica 565. Hopefully that's a definition. 565. No, it is not. It is a reference to another book. Could be seen clearly from Hypnotochomaica, words meaning not overlaid by mass of ornate detail. It should therefore be pointed out that the whole first part of the book is a description of the dreamer's ascent into a world of gods and heroes, of his initiation into a Venus mystery, followed by the illumination of semo-apotheosis of Polyphilo and his Polia. In the second, smaller part, this leads to disenchantment and the cooling off of the lovers, culminating in the knowledge that it was all only a dream It is a descent to Earth, to the reality of daily life, and it is not altogether clear whether the hero managed to preserve in secret the nature of the heavenly center which he acquired by the ascent. 566. 566 is from Dorn. And now, preserving in secret the nature of the heavenly center which he acquired by the descent, that is the end process. Right now, keeping it secret was definitely something that you needed to do because the Catholic Church would remove your head at best, right? Probably even with severe torture in the middle of it, if they found out that you were actually doing the things that I described in this book. They are not a good place to go for true knowledge or self-reflection at all. Right? The Catholic Church wants you to go to them for the authority, not to be the authority in your own life. Back to the text. One rather doubts it. Nevertheless, his exciting adventure has left us a psychological document, which is a perfect example of the course and the symbolism of the individuation process. The spirit, if not the language of alchemy, breathes through it, and it sheds light even on the darkest enigmas and riddles of the masters. I believe that, right? I believe that all of these riddles of the masters can be unlocked by the things that I talk about in this book. And if not all of them, most of them, right? All is a very big word. Some of them had no idea what they were talking about, right? Agrippa being the prime example of someone relaying information that was not correct at all in any way, shape, or form. There is never a reason in alchemical practices or magic to torture an animal, and that is definitely involved in Agrippa's work, right? And so it's not shedding the light on the incorrect works, but the correct ones. To me, it is a key that unlocks an awful lot of doors, right? This, what we started with, being one of those doors. We have talked all the way through this about several other doors that are unlocked by the exact same chain of events. Let's see what the footnote is. 5, 6, 7. For a thorough psychological analysis of the text, see Fears David, the Dream of Polyphilo. Meyer's journey through the planetary houses begins with Saturn, who is coldest, heaviest, and most distant of the planets, the maleficus and abode of evil, the mysterious and sinister Senex, old man, and from there he ascends to the region of the sun to look for the boy Mercurius, the longed for and long sought goal of the adept. I will refer you to the various videos that we have already done about Mercurius, but Mercurius is a representative of the spirit, those both light and dark forces, both in equal measure. One is active, one is passive, one is masculine, one is feminine, one is creative, one is destructive. But that is the long sought for goal of the adept, the boy Mercurius. Saturn, in this case, is going to be the base, and then you ascend to the sun, and then you redescend. It is an ascent ever nearer to the sun, from darkness and cold to light and warmth, from old age to youth, from death to rebirth. But he has to go back along the way he came, for Mercurius is not to be found in the region of the sun, but at the point from which he originally started. This sounds very psychological, and in fact never goes forward except at the place where it has come to a standstill. 5, 6, 8. A psychological statement which, like all such, only becomes entirely true when it can be reversed. The sought-for Mercurius is the spiritus vegetavius, a living spirit. I agree. Whose nature it is to run through all the houses of the planet. An example, the entire zodiac. And again, I agree. We could just as well say through the entire horoscope, or since the horoscope is the chronometric equivalent of individual character, through all the characterological components of the personality. I would say that that is going to be better than the horoscope. And if you are unaware, I've done a study of astrology. There's not a whole lot of value that I found there. You might, but I did not. Individual character is, on the old view, the curse or blessing which the gods bestowed on the child at its birth in the form of favorable or unfavorable astrological aspects. The horoscope is like the chirographum, the handwriting of the ordinances against us, which Christ blotted out. And he took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. Unless you actually read the Bible, right, and then it is told that none of the law is going to go away, so he didn't actually blot out any of the ordinances. Now, I do not believe that Christ was the redemptive of humanity for a variety of reasons, which are all outlined in the Bible study, because I came to that conclusion from reading the Bible. And after having disarmed the principalities and the powers, he made a show of them openly, and triumphed over them. 569. Colossians 2:14. This very ancient idea of what we may call an inborn bill of debt to fate is the Western version of prenatal karma. Original sin is a misconception, right? You are faced with temptations, but there was no original conceptual sin, right? You were meant to be here. God created you. He put you in your parents, right? And so there is no point from which you being here is devoid from God. There is no point at which in the Garden of Eden, God could have placed this tree without the knowledge that it would have been eaten from, right? If God is all-seeing, all-knowing, then he knew that they would eat from the tree. If he did not know that they would eat from the tree, he is not all-seeing and all-knowing. In addition to that, Eve was not given special instructions not to eat from the tree. Adam was. In addition to that, they did not have the capacity to understand the difference between good and evil, and so they did not know that disobeying would have been evil. Therefore, if you do not know and comprehend, it cannot be a sin. All of these things play into the very good reasons why the Bible should not be used as a literal reference for anything. Back to the text. It is the archons, the seven rulers of the planets, who imprint its fate upon the soul. Now, that again, the seven forces, the vices and virtues, in that point, imprinting upon you your various trials, that is going to be true. Thus, now as archons, to me that is a lot less true, right? I do not believe that there are these archons out there holding the moon and making it turn. I just don't see that. Priscillian says that the soul on its descent to birth passes through certain circles where it is made captive by evil powers, and in accordance with the will of the victorious prince is forced into diverse bodies, and his handwriting is inscribed upon it. 570. Orosius. Presumably, this means that the soul is imprinted with the influences of the various planetary spheres, the virtues and the vices. There are 7 coins. Right, they are represented by spheres. The descent of the soul through the planetary houses corresponds to its passage through the gates of the planets as described by Origen. The first gate is of lead and is correlated with Saturn. 571. 571 is another reference to another book, from which it is clear that Meyer is following an old tradition. 572. Usually the series seems to begin with Saturn. His Peregrinatio Chemical repeats the old heavenly journey of the soul, an idea which seems to have been developed more particularly in Persia. I shall not go more closely here into the transitus through the planetary houses. 573. The interested reader is referred to Cumont, and the rest is just a reference to other things. It is sufficient to know that Michael Meyer, like Mercurius, passes through them on his mysterious journey. 574. The journey motif in psychology and alchemy concerning Mercurius see the pure cynics motif in Curtius, European literature in the Latin Middle Ages. This journey is reminiscent of the voyage of the hero, one motif of which becomes evident in the archetypal meeting of the critical place, the ford, with the ortus, its head, showing the four colors. There are other motifs too. Where there is a monster, a beautiful maiden is not far away, for they have, as we know, a secret understanding so that the one is seldom found without the other. I wonder what that could possibly be. As above, so below. The Sibyl, the guide of souls, shows the hero the way to Mercurius, who in this case is Hermes Trismegistus, the supreme mystagogue. In the Shepherd of Hermas, it is related that the hero, while traveling along the Via Campana, met a monster resembling a dragon of the sea, and the beast had on its head four colors: black, then the color of flame and blood, then golden, then white. After I had passed the beast by and had gone about 30 feet further, lo, a maiden met me, adorned as if coming from the bridal chamber, all in white and with white sandals, veiled to the forehead, and a turban for a headdress, but her hair was white. 575 is the Shepherd of Hermas. Now, the black to me is going to represent the feminine void. That is the lower aspect in my understanding. The color of flame would be red, right, as it is flame and blood. Right, now that would normally be gold or orange or even possibly yellow, but it being red, yellow, and orange, all three of them would fit perfectly fine with the lower as below. White to me is going to be the masculine aspect. I do not agree with it being called the maiden, but that is purely pedantics, right? That is just me arguing about terminology, and that does not even really matter. You can ascribe masculine or feminine to either one. I ascribe feminine to the black because it is the part that accepts, the part that takes in itself. I ascribe masculine to the white because it is the part that penetrates into, the part that changes, the part that destroys. And so that is why I ascribe those particular designations, but that does not mean that they are correct. That is just the way that I identify them. And so it could be a maiden symbolized by the white, but the white is going to be the penetrative powers, the cleansing even, and then the feminine is going to be the dark powers, the void, accepting even. And so for me, this is not it is a lesser understanding, but it is still an understanding. The similarity between the two stories is so complete that one is tempted to assume that Meyer had read The Shepherd of Hermas. This is not very likely. Though he had a good education in the humanities, I can see in his writings no evidence that he was familiar with the patristic literature, and in his references to the writings of Albertus and Thomas Aquinas, 576, in his Symbola Aurae Mensae, and in his references to the writings of Albertus and Thomas Aquinas, he might easily have let slip a remark of this kind. But one finds nothing, and it does not seem very probable either, that Meyer had direct knowledge of the New Testament Apocrypha. Hermas interprets the maiden as the church, and Meyer, 1500 years later, as the Erythraean Sibyl, which only goes to show once more that the newer is the older. The Supreme Mistress led Hermes to the kingdom of the triune God, but Meyer she leads to Hermes Trismegistus and Trisomatus, the triadic Mercurius, who would reveal to him the secret of the Phoenix's resurrection. 577. I would also draw attention to the maiden and dragon in the triadic symbolism in the dream of Polyphilo, especially the encounter with the triple-tongued dragon and the black prism in the realm of Queen Eleuterilda. For the Erythraean Sibyl, see Curtius. He can find Mercurius only through the rite of ascent and descent, the circular distillation, beginning with the black lead, with the darkness, coldness, and malignity of the malefic Saturn, then ascending through the other planets to the fiery soul, where the goddess gold is heated in the hottest fire and cleansed of all impurities, and finally returning to Saturn, where this time he meets Mercurius and receives some useful teachings from him. Saturn has here changed from a star of ill omen into a domus barbae, house of the beard, where the wisest of all, Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, imparts wisdom. 578. Therefore I am called Hermes Trismegistos, as having 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. Tabulus Magna. Domus Barbae comes from Arab Albirba, pyramid, where Hermes was said to be buried. It is important to note that we have not found evidence of burials in the pyramids. Hermes, too, begins with the blackness. His mistress gives him the following explanation. Now, I want to point out that I am in agreement with this, right? We talked before. We will talk again about the ascent and descent. It is a vital part. It is true, right? The circular distillation, even, is true. I am in full accordance with that. Now, the ascribing of colors and the particulars of that is up for debate. But the actual process of distillation, the ascent and descent, the ascent and descent, ascent and descent are vitally important. You cannot use only half of the process or you will not get the good result. The black is this world in which you are living, the color of fire and blood, that this world must be destroyed in blood and fire. The golden part is you, who have fled from this world, for even as gold is tried in the fire and becomes valuable, so also you who live among them are tried. The white part is the world to come, in which the elect of God shall dwell, for those who have been chosen by God for eternal life will be without spot and pure. 579. The Shepherd of Hermas. This is simply one of those things, right? Everybody wants to believe that they are going to be the chosen of God. But in reality, everyone is the chosen of God. God created every single one. Every single person is the chosen of God. There is no particular chosen. It is one of those lenses that we took off when we read the Bible that led to the Enlightenment process. Right? God did not have a chosen people. He created all of the people. You can become a chosen person through your actions of aligning yourself with the will of the Creator. But even that is not going to be explicitly stated. That is going to be something that you have to assume by your actions and your fruit. If you do not have the fruit, then you are not taking the right actions. If you are not getting the understanding, you are not doing the correct reflections. If you are not achieving the ability to manipulate the Holy Spirit, you are not achieving anything. In alchemy, the fire purifies, but it also melts the opposites into a unity. Again, I refer to my own work. He who ascends unites the powers of above and below and shows his full power when he returns again to earth. Just like we started with, the as above and the as below trinity being unified through the heart, the philosopher's stone, gives you the full power. Yes. 580. Its power is complete when it is turned towards the earth. That is a different read, right? When it is turned to the earth and when he returns to the earth, it's two different things. When you turn your power to the earth, there is something that happens. There is, right? I am investigating earth energies. If you are unaware, I have recently taken up dowsing. I am playing with earth energies, the magnetic forces of the earth, instead of just myself. I have discovered several things. It is one of the reasons why the second edition is going to take a lot longer than I thought. And when you are doing the earth work, that is something. That is something. By this is to be understood the production, on the one hand, of the panacea or medicina catholica, and on the other, of a living being with a human form, the filius philosophorum, who is often depicted as a youth or hermaphrodite or child. He is a parallel of the Greek anthropos, but he also appears as an anthroparian, a kind of goblin, a familiar, who stands by the adept in his work and helps the physician to heal. 581, and we will be back. As for example, Asclepios and his Kabir Telephoros. And see Myers something in German. I want to point out something right here, and I want to be as clear as I possibly can. I have healed myself, both in my voice, which hopefully you can understand if you have been following for a while, Where I am talking right now, this week, is entirely different than even last week, much less a year ago, much less 2. I have healed my shoulder, I have healed my back, I am in the process still of healing my leg, but it has been 5 months. 2 days ago was 5 months, and I ran a mile that day and today. So I am healing, right? This is literal physical healing enabled by the things that I talk about in this book. At no point in this process at all was there any kind of goblin, no familiar, no outside entity, right? In the actual physical process of healing, I have had an angel visit me and relate a message. I had a cosmic experience by which I was taken out of my body. I did not see an entity during that process, right? I saw humanity. I saw the unfolding of all of the things and the interplay, but not a divine representative of an archetype or an angel, a demon, God, a goblin, any kind of familiar. None of that has been a part of me healing myself. And that is a thing that has happened. This being ascends and descends and unites below with above, gaining a new power which carries its effect over into everyday life. Now, this thing that ascends and descends is your soul. It is not anything external. You might visualize it that way, but that doesn't mean it is true. His mistress gives Hermas this advice: therefore, do not cease to speak to the ears of the saints. Footnote 582. 582 is from the Shepherd of Hermas. We will be back at 584. In other words, work among your fellow men by spreading the news of the rise would be better for me than the risen, because there is nothing in the risen that is going to cause you to get redeemed. There is, however, in the rise that will. Just as Meyer on his return met Mercurius, so Hermas on his next vision met the Poimen, the shepherd. A white fleece around his shoulders, a knapsack on his back, and a staff in his hand. Hermas recognized that it was he to whom I was handed over, namely the shepherd of the lamb, which was himself. That I can agree with. In iconography, the Good Shepherd has the closest connection with Hermes Cryophoros, the lamb bearer. Thus, even in antiquity, these two savior figures coalesced. Yeah. Even in antiquity, because it was not taken from antiquity and inserted into the book where they were creating the doctrine. That had absolutely nothing to do with it. Whereas Hermas is handed over to his shepherd, Hermes hands over his art and wisdom to his pupil Meyer, and thus equips him to do something himself and to work with the age of the magic caduceus. This, for a physician who was an alchemist, took the place of the staff of Asclepios, which had only one snake. The sacred snake of Asclepion signified the god heals, but the caduceus, or Mercurius in the form of the conjunctio in the retort, means, in the hands of the physician lies the magic remedies granted by God, and I am in full accordance with this understanding. 584. For the interpretation of the caduceus, see Servius. For the serpents have heads which look inward, in order to signify that ambassadors ought to discuss and agree among themselves. For which reason ambassadors of peace are called caduciatores, and those caducei are added to apples, one of the sun and one of the moon. Mercury causes these two fierce animals to agree, so surely we ought to agree with one another. Others say that the Latins call Mercury by the name as if he were Mercurius, the mid-runner, because he is always passing between heaven and the lower regions, and that the caduceus is assigned to him because he brings enemies together in friendship by mediating confidence. The medieval writer Pyrrhus says of the caduceus, he will very readily bring discordant minds into agreement, and will bind together the two serpents, that is, mutual hatreds, into one by the rod of his doctrine. We're going to pull out the book again because, right, we have these 7 points. If you were to take the black line, that is the void at the bottom, and you were to weave it in between each one of these in a sinuous pattern, right? And then you take the light and you weave it exactly opposite in a sinuous pattern all the way around. That creates a double helix, which is a symbol for medicine in the genes, right? That is important. The caduceus represents the same thing. In a true caduceus, there are 7 folds in the snake. Not 5, not 3, but 7. They do indeed face inward. That is on purpose too. And the best of this would show one of those snakes going up and one coming down. But as far as I am aware, that symbology is not actually represented, although it should be. One of those snakes represents the void. One of those snakes represents the point. They are weaved through these 7 steps in a way that binds together the hatreds, right? The 2 sides of the coin would be the hatreds, right? It's not necessarily hate, but one of them is, right? Love and hate. Love is giving away affection. Hate is not having a return. That is another word for wrath. Wrath is a better expression than hate. It is the same for all the 7 coins. There is the hatred of each other, right? Pride and humility hate each other. Lust and chastity hate each other. You bind them together through the process described. To me, this is in perfect accordance with what I already believe. So, once again, confirmation bias acknowledged. The numerous analogies between 2 texts so far apart in time enable us to take a psychological view of the transformations they describe. While that is okay, that is not this is literally a thing, right? This is the thing that was revealed to me, and it is the thing that is confirmed repeatedly inside of these texts. The sequence of colors coincides by and large with the sequence of the planets. Gray and black correspond to Saturn, 585. In the first place, Saturn reigns in Negredo and the evil world. They symbolize the beginning in darkness, in the melancholy, fear, wickedness, and wretchedness of human life. It is Meyer from whom the saying comes about, the noble substance which moves from lord to lord, in the beginning whereof its wretchedness with vinegar, 586. That is from Ibid. By lord, he means the archon or ruler of the planetary house. He adds, and so it will fare with me. The darkness and blackness can be interpreted psychologically as man's confusion and lostness, that state which nowadays results in an anamnesis, a thorough examination of all those contents which are the cause of the problematical situation, or at any rate its expression. This examination, as we know, includes the irrational contents that originate in the unconscious and express themselves in fantasies and dreams. All of this is shadow work, it is self-reflection, it is trying to enlighten. The analysis and interpretation of dreams confront the conscious standpoint with the statements of the unconscious, thus widening its narrow horizon. This loosening up of cramped and rigid attitudes corresponds to the solution and separation of the elements by the aqua permanens, which was already present in the body and is lured out by the art. The water is a soul or spirit, that is, a psychic substance, which now in its turn is applied to the initial material. This corresponds to using the dream's meaning to clarify existing problems. Solutio is defined in this sense by Dorn, 587. As bodies are dissolved by solution, so the doubts of the philosophers are resolved by knowledge. Don't disagree. The situation is now gradually illuminated, as is a dark night by the rising moon. The illumination comes to a certain extent from the unconscious, since it is mainly dreams that put us on the track of enlightenment. This dawning light corresponds to the albedo, the moonlight, which in the opinion of some alchemists heralds the rising sun. The growing redness, rubido, which now follows, denotes an increase of warmth and light coming from the sun, consciousness. This corresponds to the increasing participation of consciousness, which now begins to react emotionally to the contents produced by the unconscious. At first, the process of integration is a fiery conflict, but gradually it leads over to the melting or synthesis of the opposites. The alchemists term this the rubido, in which the marriage of the red man and the white woman, Sol and Luna, is consummated. Although the opposites flee from one another, they nevertheless strive for balance, since a state of conflict is too inimical to life to be endured indefinitely. They do this by wearing each other out. The one eats the other, like the two dragons or the other ravenous beast of alchemical symbolism. I'm not in disagreement with that, right? All of this is the internal reflection process, and while it may not be exactly as it described, it is close enough to count. Astrologically, as we have said, this process corresponds to an ascent through the planets from the dark, cold, distant Saturn to the Sun. To the alchemist, the connection between individual temperament and the positions of the planets was self-evident. For these elementary astrological considerations were the common property of any educated person in the Middle Ages, as well as in antiquity. The ascent through the planetary spheres therefore meant something like a shedding of the characterological qualities indicated by the horoscope, a retrogressive liberation from the character imprinted by the archons. The conscious or unconscious model for such an ascent was the Gnostic Redeemer, who either deceives the archons by guile or breaks their power by force. A similar motif is the release from the bill of debt to fate. The men of late antiquity in particular felt their psychic situation to be fatally dependent on the compulsion of the stars, hymarmene, a feeling which may be compared with that inspired by a modern theory of heredity, or rather by the pessimistic use of it. A similar demoralization sets in many neuroses when the patient takes these psychic factors, producing the symptoms, as though they were unalterable facts, which it is useless to resist. The journey through the planetary houses, like the crossing of the great halls in the Egyptian underworld, therefore signifies the overcome of a psychic obstacle, or of an autonomous complex, suitably represented by a planetary god or demon. Anyone who has passed through all the spheres is free from compulsion. I agree with that. He who has won the crown of victory and become like a god. I do not necessarily agree with that. Do you get creative powers? Yes. Can you heal? Yes. Can you do other really amazing things? Yes. I absolutely emphatically stand upon that. It does not make you a god. It does not make you close to a god. Now, you are the individualized piece of God given this 5D navigation device to go through this 5D dimension, right? But that does not make you a god. You are not a god. You are merely a representative, a tiny sliver. Your fingernail is not you. You are an atom inside the fingernail of God. In our psychological language today, we express ourselves more modestly. The journey through the planetary houses boils down to becoming conscious of the good and bad qualities in our own character, absolute agreement, and the apotheosis means no more than maximum consciousness, which amounts to a maximal freedom of the will, absolute agreement again. This goal cannot be better represented than by the alchemical symbol of the position of the sun at noon in Zosimos, 588. Birth lot. But at the zenith, the descent begins. The mystic traveler goes back to the Nile mouth from which he started. He repeats, as it were, the descent of the soul which had led in the first place to the imprinting of the chirographium. He retraces his steps through the planetary houses until he comes back to the dark Saturn. This means that the soul, which was imprinted with a horoscopic character at the time of its descent into birth, conscious now of its godlikeness, beards the archons in their layers and carries the light undisguised down into the darkness of the world. Here again, psychology makes no special claims. What before was a burden unwillingly borne and blamed upon the entire family is seen by the greatest possible insight, which can be very modest, to be no more than the possession of one's own personality, and one realizes, as though this were not self-evident, that one cannot live from anything except one is. On returning to the house of Saturn, our pilgrim finds the long-sought Mercurius, 589. More precisely, before he comes to the house of Saturn in one of the entrances. Meyer passes remarkably quickly over this highly significant encounter and mentions merely their numerous conversations without, however, disclosing their content. This is the more surprising in that Mercurius either personifies the great teacher or else has the character of the arcane substance. He has the character of the arcane substance. See Mercurius, the entire study of Mercury and sulfur, for more on that. Both of which would be a fruitful source for future revelations. For Mercurius is the light-bringing nous who knows the secret of transformation and of immortality. Let us assume that Meyer's sudden silence is no mere accident, but was intentional or even a necessity. This assumption is not entirely without justification, since Meyer was one of the founders of the International Rosicrucian Society. Footnote 590. See Arthur White, The Real History of the Rosicrucians, and would therefore have no doubt been in a position to expatiate at length upon the Hermetic Arcana. What we know of these so-called Rosicrucian secrets does nothing to explain why they were hushed up. This, incidentally, is true of most mysteries of this kind. It is very significant that the mysteries of the early church turned, soon enough, into sacraments. The word mystery became a misnomer since everything lay open in the right. Andreas Rosenkreutz used as a motto for his chemical wedding, "Mysteries profaned and made public fade and lose their grace. Therefore cast not pearls before swine, nor spread roses for the ass." This attitude might have been a motive for silence. People had so often got to know of things that were kept secret in the mysteries under the most fearsome oath, and had wondered on why on earth they should ever have been the subject of secrecy. One of the things that I am doing over here is lifting the veil of secrecy, right? I am attempting as best I can to lay out as clearly as possible the mysteries that I have unveiled, right? We are looking for evidences of correlation in all of these things, but one of the things that I am doing is casting aside that veil, quite intentionally. I do not have an oath of secrecy. I am not aligned with any of the clubs. They did have reasons for that, most importantly being that the Catholic Church would kill you for trying to achieve enlightenment. That is not something to be dismissed or even trivialized. I am casting my pearls before the swine, right? But I say quite often on this channel that this channel is open for everyone. But it is not for everyone, right? Most people will not make it this far into this study. Most people will not make it past the first 30 seconds where I introduce what I am doing, right? I try to be extremely clear. I am reading aloud and discussing the points as we go along, right? Most people don't make it past that. I can see that in my analytics. That is fine. I am not here for everyone. I am here for those who are willing to put in the work. By putting in the work of even watching an entire video, you are casting yourself not as swine, right? And so while I am casting these pearls for anyone to pick up, the only ones that are going to pick it up are the ones who are not the swine, who are the ones that are actually seeking, that are actually going to go through this much of me reading aloud from a book, right? Repeatedly. We do this a lot. We discern a lot. We give out a lot of pearls. Very few people are going to pick them up. Even though this is public, this is wide as open. Anybody can come by and pick up these pearls. Most people will not. Self-importance or the prestige of the priesthood or of the initiates seem the obvious deduction, and there can be no doubt that the mysteries often were abused in this way. But the real reason was the imperative need to participate in a, or perhaps the, secret, without which life loses its supreme meaning. The secret is not really worth keeping, but the fact that it is still obstinately kept reveals an equally persistent psychic motive for keeping secrets, and that is the real secret, the real mystery. It is indeed remarkable and mysterious that this gesture of keeping something secret should be made at all. Why does man need to keep a secret, and for what purpose does he invent an artificial one, which he even decks out as an ineffable holy right? The thing hidden is always more or less irrelevant, for in itself it is no more than an image or sign pointing to a content that cannot be defined more closely. This content is certainly not a matter for indifference, since it indicates the living presence of a numinous archetype. The essential thing is the hiding, an expressive gesture which symbolizes something unconscious and not to be named, lying behind it. Something, therefore, that is either not yet conscious or cannot or will not become conscious. It points, in a word, to the presence of an unconscious content, which exacts from consciousness a tribute of constant regard and attention. With the application of interest, the continual perception and assimilation of the effects of the secret become possible. This is beneficial to the conduct of life because the contents of the unconscious can then exert their compensatory effect and, if taken note of and recognized, bring about a balance that promotes health. On a primitive level, therefore, the chief effect of the mysteries is to promote health, growth, and fertility. If there were nothing good in the right, it would presumably never have come into existence, or would long since have perished. The tremendous psychic effect of the Eleusinian mysteries, for instance, is beyond question. Psychotherapeutic experience has made the meaning of secrets once more a topical question, not only from the religious or philosophical point of view, but also in respect of the demands of conscience, with which individuation confronts a man. Meyer's silence is eloquent, and we soon find when we try to see the psychological equivalent of the descent and of the discovery of Mercurius. The maximal degree of consciousness confronts the ego with its shadow, an individual's psychic life with the collective psyche. These psychological terms sound light enough, but they weigh heavy, for they denote an almost unendurable conflict. A psychic strait whose terrors only he knows who has passed through it. What one then discovers about oneself and about man and the world is of such a nature that one would rather not speak of it, and besides, it is so difficult to put into words that one's courage fails at a bare attempt. So it need not be at all a frivolous evasion if Meyer merely hints at his conversations with Mercurius. In the encounter with life and the world, there are experiences that are capable of moving us to long and thorough reflection, from which, in time, insights and convictions grow up, a process depicted by the alchemist as the philosophical tree. The unfolding of these experiences is regulated, as it were, by two archetypes: the anima, who expresses life, and the wise old man, who personifies meaning. 591. 591 says, for details, see archetypes of the collective unconscious. Our author was led in the first place by the anima civil to undertake the journey through the planetary houses as the precondition of all that was to follow. It is therefore only logical that, towards the end of the descent, he should meet thrice great Hermes, the fount of all wisdom. This aptly describes the character of that spirit, or thinking, which you do not, like an intellectual operation, perform yourself, as the little god of this world, but which happens to you as though it came from another and greater, perhaps the great spirit of the world, not inappositely named Trismegistus. The long reflection, the immensa meditato of the alchemist, is defined as an internal colloquy with another who is invisible. 592. Ruland Lexicon. We will not be back till 597. Possibly Meyer would have revealed to us something more if Mercurius had not been in such a hurry to take upon himself the role of arbiter between the owls and the birds who were fighting it. This is an allusion to the work of Myers entitled Jocus Severus, where he defends the wisdom of alchemy against its detractors, a theme that also plays an important part in his Symbola Aurea Mensae, in the form of an argument and counter-argument. One is therefore justified in assuming that Meyer got into increasing conflict with himself and his environment the more he buried himself in the secret speculations of Hermetic philosophy. Indeed, nothing else could have been expected, for the world of Hermetic images gravitates round the unconscious, and the unconscious compensation is always aimed at the conscious positions, which are the most strongly defended because they are the most questionable. Though its apparently hostile aspect merely reflects the surly face which the ego turns towards it. In reality, the unconscious compensation is not intended as a hostile act, but as a necessary and helpful attempt to restore the balance. For Meyer, it meant an inner and outer conflict which was not abolished, but only embittered, by the firmness of his convictions. For every one-sided conviction is accompanied by the voice of doubt, and certainties that are mere beliefs turn into uncertainties which may correspond better with truth. The truth of the sic ut non, yes and no, almost but not quite recognized by Abelard, is a difficult thing for the intellect to bear. So it is no wonder that Meyer got stuck in the conflict and had to postpone his discovery of the phoenix until doomsday. Fortunately, he was honest enough not to assert that he ever made the lapis or philosophical gold, and for this reason he never spread a veil of deception over his work. I do claim that I have made the philosophical gold. I do. You don't have to like that, but it is a true thing. Thanks to his scrupulousness, his late successors are at least able to guess how far he progressed in the art and where his labors came to a standstill. He never succeeded, as we can now see, in reaching the point where conflict and argument became logically superfluous, where yes and no are two aspects of the same thing. Thou wilt never make the one which thou seekest, saith the Master, except first there be made one thing of thyself. And that is going to bring us to the end of this study. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I don't believe that I have a whole lot that I need to expound upon here. We have talked about this quite extensively. I'm ready for a new part of the subject to come up, because this is a reiteration again and again of the same thing, and he doesn't really get it, right? He's close. He's very close, but he never quite crosses that ledge into the metaphysical. He tries to keep it grounded into the physical, and that's just not going to work. It requires both the body and the spirit to come into accordance with the as above and the as below. Without both, there is none. Without the full understanding, you don't even have an understanding. There can be lesser understandings that help you to get to the greater understanding, but until you have the greater understanding, all of this is just wow, right? It's like, what is he even talking about? Well, I know. To me, it is glaringly obvious. I wrote a whole book about it. And so, if you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership, picking up a copy of my book, consulting me directly for a membership, or, most especially these days, doing that free thing and hitting that hype button. The channel will very much appreciate it, and so will I. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt This. Peace.